Hi, my name's Sophie Westwood. I'm a researcher in residence with the Plymouth Health Determinants Research Collaboration. I'm going to talk to you about ethnography and observation for a research and practice application. So I'll talk a bit about the ingredients of ethnography, about human learning systems and social complexity, about ethnography and complexity being natural companions, about different ethnographic methodologies, and about ethnographic methods for a research and practice application. And I'll finish with a couple of examples where ethnographic and observation methodologies have been used for Plymouth HDRC projects. So the ingredients of ethnography. Hopefully it goes without saying that all practice should be conducted with the appropriate ethical clearance, that the necessary consent, data management agreements and so on are in place. In its infancy, ethnography was a technique used to research different groups of people around the world, and participant observation was the classic methodology. For example, Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa is an ethnographic work that describes the life of Samoan girls and women on the island of Tau in the Manua archipelago in 1926. In-depth case studies were typical and characteristic of many ethnographies. For example, Marjorie Shostak's Nisa, The Life and Words of a Kung Woman in 1981. Ethnography started out as place-based and the field was a single site. It has since become much more dynamic, often being multi-sited and often subject matters being investigated are focused in on particular social phenomenon. For example, Karen Lumsden's Boy Racer Culture, Youth, Masculinity and Deviance in 2013 is a study of a subgroup in Aberdeen defined by the activity that brings them together, which occurred at more than one site. Ethnography is inherently empirical. It always includes observation and talking and listening to key stakeholders. There are many other creative methods that are used depending on the subject matter, the practicalities, and of course ethics. For example, the use of body cameras, mark making, audio recordings of voice but also other sounds, printed and online media, and so on. Participation is often, but not always, used. There are strengths and limitations that have to be considered when choosing the best methods to use. Ethnography requires a rapport to be built with the participants, and this takes time. In order to build trust, conducting ethnography ethically and with the interests of participants at the heart of the study is important, so that it is not an extractive or transactional relationship, and so more in-depth data is accessible. It is essential that ethnography is reflexive and collaborative to minimise bias and reveal both the views of the participants and the observer. It is necessary to approach ethnography with a theoretical framework within which to work and create a coherent and rigorous piece of work. The ethnographic process is iterative inductive, in that the work does not begin with a hypothesis but a topic of interest, and the work is done iteratively, like in a spiral. So participating, observing, writing, reflecting, reading, thinking, talking, listening, and participating, and so on again. In Plymouth, the Health Determinants Research Collaboration, or PHDRC, is taking a human learning systems, or HLS, approach. Working in this way recognises social complexity in that societies are made up of individuals, actions and reactions, not in direct response to a single cause or chain of causes and effects, but didactically within a social reality that is always in flux. A quote taken from the Human Learning Systems website, where you can learn much more about the approach, describes how causes and effects are indistinguishable. Each action is simultaneously a reaction. Issues are connected in ways that mean problems are not open to being solved, but instead need to be held in a dynamic equilibrium. Ethnography and complexity are natural companions. Ethnography is a qualitative research method that captures contextual factors that give rise to different outcomes, and in-depth evidence that describes the complex social environment individuals are acting within. It is acknowledged that individuals and how they behave is influenced by a complex system that creates the social context they experience, and which affords them opportunities and barriers to different choices and behaviours. The system varies for different individuals and is complex due to the variables involved being many, dynamic, fluid and unpredictable. Ethnography allows participants the time to describe and demonstrate their social context, and the researcher to observe how and why individuals act in certain ways and at certain times. At the same time, similarities and patterns can be revealed and described to explain groups of people choosing to act in similar ways. As explained earlier, traditionally ethnography was place-based and likely to be single-sited. Now ethnography is much more dynamic and methodologies are numerous and creative. Often ethnography today is multi-sited, as it is located where the phenomenon being studied occurs, like Karen Lumsden's boy races in Aberdeen, who had more than one location where they would get together. Sometimes the ethnographer may be an insider, whereby they are already a member of the community of interest. Digital methods are used to engage with internet communities and phenomena. Experiential ethnography makes use of data relevant to other senses, which we know are important to the human experience. When the phenomenon of interest is mobile, methods that are also mobile must be developed. And in social research settings, rapid or focused methods are frequently employed due to time and money resource constraints and/or more focused research questions. Local authorities, their partners in the VCSE sector, need to understand the complex and ever-changing social context in which people with complex needs are living within, to be able to find ways to effectively support people with complex needs and to adapt as their needs and context evolve. As a result, ethnography is very useful for a research and practice application, and rapid or focused methods are most likely to be used because often a project will be time and funding limited and/or have an action research cycle design built in. When doing this sort of work, current literature on the topic will inform a theory and a predefined research question. Often semi-structured interviews and focus groups are used to collect focused oral data rapidly. Data collection could involve any and several of the other mediums, might be place-based or multi-sited. There might be an insider or digital methods, sensory or mobile methods are deployed. Key informants and situations will be targeted, and rather than there being a single ethnographer, often it will be a team effort, providing support and reflection to one another throughout. So pragmatic methods are used for pragmatic purposes, generating evidence for possible positive change and problem solving. Here are two projects the Plymouth HDRC have supported, which used ethnographic and observation methods. The first being Ecotherapy at Pool Farm, which is an intervention led by an NHS mental health nurse alongside Grace, who is an outdoor learning practitioner and researcher. They were supported by Plymouth HDRC to gather data to effectively evaluate the project. There is already evidence for green social prescribing and ecotherapy, and discussion with academic experts shaped the focus of data collection to focus on what works for whom. Grace is both a participant and an observer of the intervention, as she helps run the sessions and makes observational notes on each young person for each session. The highlights of these observations are shared in weekly reflection meetings with the wider team. Grace is being supported by the team to analyse the data. Similarly, the Trusted Professionals project was also a team effort and key informants were targeted. Observation of usual practice took place alongside other methods to track and map developments and costs of service delivery. Focus groups were used to pool the knowledge and skills of involved professionals. Peer researchers with lived experience conducted appreciative inquiry interviews with involved professionals. Ethnographic and observational methods were integral to both projects to understand the complexity in which these projects are interacting with, and at the same time pragmatic methods were used in both projects for pragmatic purposes, to be able to gather useful data with limited time and resources.